Hey guys, I'm learning TFT and I'm sharing my learnings with you so that you can learn and I can learn more effectively as well. In this video, I'm going to talk about a new AP comp that is still being developed, and it's dual carry Street Demon Brand Ziggs. A lot of top players are starting to experiment with this a lot, and I just came across it yesterday. If you noticed my last video, I did a meta report on 14.1b from Greya, who talked about this in his video, as well as in my conversation with Marcel P. We talked about how AD is kind of like the dominant force in the meta right now. If you look at Cypher, this is really Draven, Reroll Zed, Zaya, Zeri, Misfortune. It's all AD at the forecast level. And even Reroll, it's like Rengar, Vayne. TF kind of uses AD items, like you can flex Rageblade with Zeri and Vayne. So when you look at this meta right now, it's predominantly AD. And last patch, we had or 14.1, had very heavy AP because everyone was leaning towards Strategist Amp Annie. After the nerf, we've kind of struggled. I think people have kind of struggled to figure out what do you play with AP. And so there's a new way to play Street Demon Strategist with Brand and Ziggs carry that I'm going to talk about today. So this is the high level board. I'm going to go through some notes I took as far as how to itemize, what augments are good. And I'm going to go through a VOD review of Prestivent, who was a representative at Worlds from NA, who got first place with this comp, I think sometime today, like 6 hours ago or something, and kind of go through the ins and outs of how that works. So if you want to jump straight to the VOD review, take a look at the timestamp in the description below. So at a high level, the way that this board works, it's actually not that dissimilar from the Annie board, except you're playing around dual carry Brand Ziggs instead of Annie. You want to build more traditional damage items, so very specifically Shojin, JG, Guardbreaker for Brand works the best. Guardbreaker can be swapped out for Rabadons or GS, but you really want Shojin and JG for the crit value, especially when you're playing against Rengar. You need Rengar reroll is starting to get a lot more dominant in the meta as far as play rate goes. Let me actually see if I can pull up. Yeah, like pick rate 0.65. Rengar has the best AVP and really high win rate at 19%. And I suspect that this, trending pick rate is going up. We go to top 4 share. Rengar has second most top 4 share and highest win share, right? So I already posted a video on Rengar recently in a coaching session I did with Asa. But given that Rengar is running around, and I talked about this in my Anima Squad Zaya video as well, I put together a post on Twitter about how to build Zaya here that went pretty viral, has 47,000 views. Basically, I was talking about how Shojin is not BIS, and this was a hat tip from Asa. You really want to build damage, and I suspect a big part of that is because we're starting to see Rengar run around, Rengar 3 specifically, and he is kind of a drain tank melee. So if all you do is cast a bunch, but kind of deal medium amounts of damage or low amounts of damage, he just uses that to generate more mana, and then casts his ability, deals a ton of damage, heals back up. So the reason I suspect right now, more than ever, it's important to build damage specifically on like a Zaya build or here, when you look at Shojin, it all performs worse versus a damage build. Same is true for Brand and Ziggs, because you need to be able to have single target burst and take down that Rengar 3 really quickly in 1 or 2 casts. If it's going to take you 3 casts, Rengar's just going to heal back up and you're never going to be able to kill him. So that's why you want to build Brand and Ziggs in this manner. Mana Sniper's Focus are really good for Brand. By the way, you want to itemize Brand over Ziggs first, since you have 5 Street Demon for Techie. So he's just going to benefit from his traits a lot more. And Ziggs with Cyber Boss here is a great holder of Morello or Red Buff. Of course, if you don't have 3 items yet, you can start with the Morello or Red Buff on Brand. Brand is a great spreader of it as well. Although I talked in my meta video with Marcel yesterday about how in the stats, Morello looks great on Brand, but if you're facing Rengar specifically, you want full damage. Radiant JG is also very good on Brand, and then Ziggs, you can throw Red Buff. So this board is actually, it's kind of expensive because you have 3 forecasts that you want to all 2-star. Though Mordekaiser 2 on your 4-2 roll down can hold your tank items reasonably well until you find Nico 2. And it's very flexible because you can just initially carry whichever 2-star forecast, either Brand or Ziggs, that you hit. So it's less volatile, lower variance than, let's say, a pure 7 Anima squad where you're playing around Xayah and you have to hit your 2-star Xayah, otherwise you lack a lot of damage. So this board benefits from having that flexibility to itemize whoever you hit first. And then at level 9, you typically take out Mundo and Veigar, and then you can throw in Kobuko, Viego, and Samira. Samira in the stats looks really bad right now, so it might not even be worth itemizing her. Like, if you look at these stats, she's easily the worst performing 5 cost and lower than Rengar 3 and about the same as Graves. So yeah, Samira just feels really bad after they nerfed her. So like, frankly, this doesn't even need to be Samira. I feel like Samira is probably only worth playing if you have a Samira 2 and like really good items on her. Otherwise, most of the time you could just play, you know, whatever, like keep your Mundo in or whatever, keep that 5 Street Demon. As far as augments go, pretty much similar augments to what you would have picked for Strategist Annie Amp from last patch. So all the AP, mana generation, glass cannon, yeah, pretty much everything that you expect. Gold is pretty good value too. So, because you want to get to fast 8. The other thing from a condition standpoint for this, the biggest benefit is that it's usually uncontested, at least right now. Who knows, as people get more familiar with this comp, if more videos come out about this comp. Like TFT Academy right now, I don't believe has updated their tier list to include this. Like right now they're still playing around the 7 Street Demon variation, which was what I was playing around too, until in the meta analysis from both Marcel and Greya, they were talking about how this new one version is coming out, and like Robin Songs was playing it, Prestivent's playing it. So a lot of the top challenger players are really innovating with this. And even in the video that I am going to VOD review with Prestivent, he was still wondering like, oh, what do we play around for level 9? So I think this is the one that from a stats standpoint looks reasonable, but I suspect that there's still some innovation and experimentation going on. So you can kind of figure out what you want to do at level 9. But Viego is just a very strong unit, gets you extra frontline with his trait. So, and Kobuko got nerfed, so you still want to cyber boss your Ziggs, but just gives you a little extra CC as well. All right, so with that said, oh, the other thing is, because AP is so uncontested right now, the big thing is you want to scout early, because most lobbies at high elo right now are heavily AD slams, so like a lot of Rage Blade, IE, Last Whisper slams. So if you see everyone in the lobby is AD, that's definitely a good condition to lean in this direction. And if you have tears and rods because you're AP. The other thing is, a lot of games now I'm seeing, especially because with more hacks and resources, you get a lot more gold. And on certain encounters that give you like lucky shops and stuff, 3-star forecast is a very realistic win con, especially if nobody else is playing Brand and Ziggs and all the other forecasts are taking out of the pool. So you can actually stay at 8 if you happen to hit like 4 or 5 Brands or Ziggs and just roll for your 3-star forecast to win out. At the early stages, you can play around like basically your early stage techies, Zyra, Seraphine, Veigar. Veigar is probably going to be the most stable in the mid game if you were able to hit 2-star, and lets you play around Veigar, Zyra, Cyber Boss, Poppy you would later replace once you hit Ziggs. And the Street Demon version kind of has the most natural transition, but Zyra feels really weak right now. So you'd probably rather be carrying Seraphine or Veigar in the early game. But there's a lot of ways that you can flex towards it. It doesn't have to be any of these boards. Okay, so let's jump into the VOD review with Prestivent. All right, so I'm gonna kind of jump around just to speed this up. We can see that he's holding the Mundos in the early game. Usually I would be holding Nitro here. Yeah, okay. So he hits the Mundo 2, has the Zyra in shop. Doesn't really have AP items, so it'll be interesting to see at what point he kind of decides to more strongly lean in the direction of this comp. Anytime you have these hacks, you really want to lean towards, assuming all the categories are the same, you really want to lean towards this side. Like 3 gold is almost like a silver augment worth in value. And that can really snowball. So that's why he takes Prize Fighter. Okay, so this is when he leans towards AP because he gets a bunch of rods. Likely scouts the lobby, but when you have Prize Fighter, you just need to tempo. So you don't really have the luxury of seeing if you're contested or not. He was trying to decide whether or not to slam, but he figured he was strong enough that he didn't need to at this point. But his strongest slam is likely Morello, Spark, Open Sword. Sword, that's off of Carousel. Ideally, he would try to find a tier for Shojin Morello, which is already a great start towards, you know, these items here. Like you basically have your Brand and Ziggs items. So he does slam the Morello and Spark because this other player has 2 full items slammed as well. And unfortunately, he does lose, which with Prize Fighter, you want to really tempo because you get more item components the more wins you get. So picking up more techies, Anima Squad, playing around the Anima Squad opener. He ends up selling the Kindred 2, just not a great AP holder. Does win this fight. He ideally wants this Yuumi with the tier, but someone ends up taking it. And instead, he grabs a belt. So belt is really good for guard breaker. It's good for Warmogs. So belt is just a very strong component in this comp. But you do want a lot of gloves as well, since you want JG, guard breaker. Belt also makes Morello, which he already does have, but belts and gloves are probably your scarcest item components here. So continuing to skip ahead. So he has mixed streak here, win-loss, win-loss, win, which is not the greatest of openers. Does have 5 Anima Squad here. And you can see he's holding his Mundo and Zyra, since those are your 1 cost. Basically, Mundo, Zyra, Veigar, and Echo are your low cost units that you want to hold on to. Making 40 ideally. And you can see here he really does not value the Zyra pair. I've seen a lot of top players kind of just really view Zyra as a very mid option. So yeah, definitely prefer to play around Anima Squad or Veigar as your preferred carry options instead of Zyra too. He does find a guard breaker, and he still needs to find a JG down the line. Calculated enhancement here because you're playing around a dual carry. That 50 AP calculated enhancement, by the way, benefits AP slightly more than AD. So, and would be good for capping out with like Samira down the line. Not that you really want to play around Samira, but if you do, like it's not that bad. And given that you're playing around dual carry Brand Ziggs, this is extremely strong. Usually from a shred standpoint, you want to build Shiv over Spark because both Brand and Ziggs hit backline. But given item economy, oftentimes like that's not as viable. He does high roll an early Ziggs here, and so now you can start seeing that he's going to transition towards the comp that we're talking about. He does want to use a remover on Yuumi so that he can keep Strategist and Anima Squad in. And continuing to mix streak, so his gold generation is pretty poor this game. He does get an extra item component and another glove, which is really important because he needs to find that JG. And with the sword, bow, he already has, usually the bow would be good for either static shiv or red buff, but he already has Morello and Spark, so he doesn't need either of those. Therefore, GS makes a lot of sense here. And you can see here that he is already working towards his second and high roll Viego, yeah, but he is working towards his second carry item and only one tank item. So you can really see that this comp works around both Ziggs and Brand. You want them both to be fully itemized, which is why having extra item components is very strong. Like Prize Fighter, we looked here at like big grab bag, like actually Cyber, or what is it, the prismatic augment that gives you a bunch of items. Buried treasures is likely good, just because you want to have 3 fully itemized units, 2 fully itemized carries, and fully itemized tank. And then late game you can also itemize Viego, so lots and lots of items can be really valuable in this comp. All right, so we're still missing Brand, but you can see how everything's starting to come together here. I thought it was interesting that he was prioritizing putting the Warmog on the Viego to increase survivability. You see this Rengar, later when Rengar hits, it's going to be challenging. Because this comp is level 8 and requires a lot of gold to hit, rolling for days is quite valuable. And then with this roll down here, he's looking for basically putting the whole board together. So just missing Brand at this point. And there's Brand. So the hard part is what do you do with when you hit your Viego on 8? And so I think there's still a lot of experimentation going on here. But usually you would be at 5 Street Demon with Zyra over Viego here if you didn't hit the Viego. But it seems like if you hit a Viego and you already have items for Viego, like he had a BT slam, then playing 4 Street Demon can make sense, especially because he was behind on hitting the Brand 2. If you have a Brand 2 and a Ziggs 1, then and no items for Viego, you could argue that it makes sense to play Zyra over Viego for the 5 Street Demon. All right, so jumping ahead, he finds the JG for the Brand off of Carousel, and now he's in a great spot. He has 2 fully itemized carries almost in Viego and Brand. And you can see this is very item hungry, right? Because he can still itemize Ziggs, he can still itemize the Mordekaiser. Once he finds the Nico 2, he's going to probably move items from the Mord to the Nico. Gets another JG here. And he's looking to push level 9. So this is a great spot. So Treasure Dragon, he looks at Capacitor and Usually with Capacitor, you want to play it on like a 8 techie setup. And Cyberneck uplink super good here with a JG. So now he has JG on all 3 of his carries. And we'll see how that comes in handy later when he faces the Rengar comp. And hits a Viego too. So now he definitely has win out potential. Still has not hit the Nico 2. And this is also where when you're scouting early game, you definitely want to see if there are opponents who have tears and rods and or slam them, because oftentimes I think Dish Soap made some joke about how tears and rods nowadays are the rod is for Rageblade and your tears for like a vow on your Sejuani. And if you see people not slamming AP items, then you could definitely lean in this direction. But if you see anybody playing Rengar and leaning Rengar, then your Nikos are likely going to be contested because Rengar usually wants to place 3 Street Demon. And so that can make finding your Nico 2 challenging, like in this situation where we did see that someone else is playing Rengar reroll. So that makes Mord 2 extremely important to hit on your 4-2 roll down. And you can see that he got to level 9 and is winning fights without Nico 2. So Mord 2 is enough. And you don't even need fully itemized Mord 2, right? Like we have literally 1 spark without traditional tank items. And so you can see that this is a very burst down heavy comp that's looking to take down the enemy fast. So fights are ideally pretty quick. We don't have much sustain. And everything is just about bursting down the enemy, which aligns with, especially if Rengar is kind of the dominant force in the meta right now, you need that burst potential, right? Look how fast this fight is, right? Was that 15 seconds and the fight is over. Like Ascension definitely would not proc, right? So this is a very burst heavy AP comp. And Viego even like adds with Techie applies the I think lowering the enemy's damage in an AoE fashion really well. So prioritizing getting full 2 item carries in Brand Ziggs, and then ideally Viego, your 3rd carry, is really important. Look, 14 seconds, fight is over. 15 seconds. Yeah, so these fights are quick, so you do not need to prioritize tank items. I mean, he does have 2 tank items because the Warmogs is, a tank item, but he's using that more for survivability, and eventually we'll probably move it off. So here, likely gonna pick Shojin for Ziggs, move the Warmogs off of Viego, and making sure that you have preserved your removers to kind of game plan out how you want to optimally place your carry items is really important in this comp. I thought it was interesting that he decided to put the Morello on the Viego over the Ziggs, because Ziggs with Cyberboss, and we talked about how you want to put Cyberboss on Ziggs, not on Kobuko. I suspect that's true even if you have a Kobuko 2, just because you want that burst damage potential, right? Like the stun for Kobuko is useful, and maybe in certain situations, like if you're playing against a dual carry Rengar and Graves, you want to stun them. But this comp has so much burst that the stun delays, but you'd rather just like one-shot the enemy units. And Ziggs, I suspect the reason that he wants Morello on Viego over Ziggs, even though Ziggs is probably a better applier of it, because with Cyberboss he can hit a whole row and column, is the reason for the Ziggs itemization is the same reason that we talked about earlier with Brand, where you just want full damage. This is an extremely burst heavy comp, and Viego is not going to really be your primary carry. He's really good at kind of finishing off fights, getting enemy units low, but because he has AoE effect, and then you're really relying on your Brand and Ziggs to kind of finish them off. Like Brand, Ziggs, and Viego all have AoE damage, And so when we look at how these fights are progressing, right? Like Brand casts, Ziggs casts, Viego casts, and then everything's dead, right? And so when we think about this fight here, right, this is your biggest weakness, this Rengar 3. Right? Like we talked about this before. If the Ziggs had Morello, it would just kind of tickle that Rengar 3. So this is going to be your hardest matchup playing this comp, and oftentimes the Rengar will probably lose out. And so if we keep an eye on this Rengar, look how fast he's jumping around with Prowlers. But the way he won that fight is because of this burst, right? Like, let's count the casts. I'm going to slow this down. So right here, Ziggs and Brand are about to cast. Let's keep an eye on the Rengar HP bar. Boom. Okay, so both of those got hit. And then we're waiting for second cast. Second cast for Brand comes before it does for Ziggs. Cast, and then Ziggs second cast, right? So that's 2 casts. We're down to about half HP. The rest of the board is already gone, right? And this speaks to how much AoE this comp has with the Viego, Ziggs, and Brand hitting AoE across the board. But single target is the biggest weakness because their damage is spread across a lot of units. And so you need to build full damage for this comp to take out Rengar. So that was second cast. We're going to get to third cast now for Brand right here. So we're at about, you see how Rengar was at like maybe 25 to 30% damage taken, but now has already started healing up, right? So now we're on third cast for Brand. And see how this burst, it was a crit, right? That third cast by Brand with the crit. So you're really relying on this crit value of the JG guard breaker and crit value for the Ziggs. Like the way to take down Rengar is you need to one-shot him. So we see here that the third cast was a one-shot right here. Right? He's at half HP. If Brand is built with, let's say, Shojin, Rabadon, Morello, like he's just not going to have the ability to crit, get that lucky chance to burst him down one shot, right? But right here, this cast, even though Rengar is at like 80%, 70% HP, boom, right? This cast is what knocks him out. So for this comp to work, you do really need, especially against Rengar 3, you need to have that crit effect. All right, so I hope you found this video helpful on playing Street Demon Brand Ziggs. I know I learned a lot by watching that video. And if you have thoughts, comments, questions about anything I got wrong, anything you would like to add, I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.